Welcome everyone to the Newly podcast, where you get practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. On this episode, we are talking to Dick Polipnick. Dick is the head of growth at Gymdesk. He is also a serial entrepreneur and innovator whose network is completely unmatched. Welcome, Dick. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for enduring all of these crazy technical issues today.
No worries. We're getting it recorded regardless, right?
Regardless, yes. So to start out, Dick, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I come from an entrepreneurial background. I started businesses when I was just a kid. I was selling bubble gum. My godmother bought me a 1-gallon bucket of chewing gum of a bunch of different flavors, and I liked spearmint, so I didn't like all those weird flavors. So I ended up selling gum out of my locker. It was 1 for a quarter or 3 for 50 cents. And that was one of my first earliest entrepreneurial endeavors. And then that turned into, I eventually started a lawn care business. And when I was 17, bought out one of my competitors in town, and had a series of businesses throughout my early career and through college and after college. And the most notable one so far has been online growth systems, which you and I were on that team together. So did online growth systems for 6 years, and then it was acquired by Snap Agency in January 2022, and worked for them for a year. And then wanted to be in-house at a software company, working in the trenches, getting my hands dirty, because that had been, as you know, but for the listeners, it was a big component of online growth systems is we were serving a lot of SaaS companies, so software as a service. So if you think of like subscription management or subscription software, it's just those pieces of software that you're paying a monthly fee for to leverage in your business or your personal life, whatever it is. So we were serving them as customers, but I wanted to be in-house, having one product, one customer. I can solely devote my time and attention to that. So I was leveraging into my online growth systems background for that. And that's when I joined Gymdesk in January of 2023. So I've been there about 6 months and loving every day of it. So that's a quick bullet point summary of my career thus far. But personally, I just started taking drum lessons again. I used to be in a band back in the day, many years ago. So I'm starting to get back into the love of music and taking piano lessons again. So that's kind of a fun thing. I'm a board game nerd. I love outside. I love hiking, swimming, going on the lake, anything to do with water. I love. But yeah,
Awesome.
there's a couple of bullet points.
Yeah, some great bullet points. And so thanks for giving us that background. And you kind of told a little bit of your A to B story. Is there anything else that you want to sort of fill in on, how you got to where you're at? Any sort of important pivotal moments for you in your career that really sort of changed your trajectory?
Ooh, all kinds of pivot moments. I think a common thread between the journey, for whether it's A to B or B to C, and throughout that entire journey, has been constantly taking a step back and evaluating, is this the direction that I want my career to continue? Mm-hmm. And I think people don't do that enough. It's going for that hike in the woods. It's taking a vacation, but on that vacation, you have time alone, not with other people. And you go for a walk on the beach, or you lounge in a chair, or sit in a hammock and under some trees by a river, and you just have time alone in silence. And that doesn't work for everybody, but it definitely works for me. And it's that self-reflection to get away from it all. And that can only work so well when you're in your backyard or walking around your own neighborhood. So there's something about getting away, being in a different location. Even it's like a couple summers ago, I went to my parents' place in central Minnesota for an entire week and just reflected on the direction of the business and where I wanted to take it and what do next steps look like. And that's when I decided we were offering 20 services and we cut 19 of them and decided to go all in on one of them. And that was that decision I came up with while I was, I had hours of ample time to just reflect on the business and think about where I wanted to take it. So that's a huge nugget for me that's been invaluable in my career, not just for the businesses that I've run and the direction of the businesses that I want to take, but for me personally. Do I want to be in lawn care? I used to think when I was a kid, that was my first legitimate business, that I was going to scale this and this was going to be a $500 million lawn care business, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and then upon trying to scale that, I thought this is really hard to scale.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
profit margins are thin. It's hard to find good help. So constantly analyzing and readjusting, because then I got into a couple of different businesses, and then that's how I narrowed my scope of expertise. And here's maybe a good story. This is something that I give younger people when they're starting in their careers. There is definitely something to be said about picking a niche, picking one lane, going all in your 20s and 30s and saying, this is my sweet spot. I'm going to become an expert at X to achieve Y. But I personally believe it's so hard to know what that thing should be until you try a little bit of everything first.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that the world's best swimmer never stepped foot in a pool, right? And the person who could have been the best track star in the world never stepped on a track, right? So you don't know unless you try it. So I'm a huge believer in trying the buffet of life in multiple aspects. I think literally I'm a huge believer in trying a bunch of foods and seeing if you like it.
Yeah.
But same thing in your career. You don't, not just for roles, like where do you enjoy it? Do you get fulfillment from, maybe you're really good at sales, maybe you're really good at fulfillment, maybe you like client facing, maybe you want to be on the back end, but also in industry, right? Maybe you've got a heart for healthcare. For me, I discovered that I'm really passionate about technology. So very different from the lawn mowing business that I originally had in landscaping. I was able to pull in from that design experience from doing landscaping projects, and now I can make beautiful designs digitally and work with teams.
There you go. I love that. That's such a great advice in helping grow your career. So the theme of our show today is becoming a hub of connection. So what does it mean to become a hub of connection? Maybe tell us about how a connection hub grow, how you grow your own network with valuable folks.
Great question. The best way to grow or to add valuable people to your network is to be a valuable connection yourself, because then other valuable people want you in their network. Hard to do overnight and flip that switch, but it's definitely an attitude. It's a way of, be the person that you would want to connect with. And that means being proactive. And starting out early in my career, I wasn't the person with all the connections. I didn't have a ton of experience. I couldn't go to coffee with somebody and give them advice. Although at the time I probably thought I could, right? So it was very selfish, but here's the beauty of it is so many people who are further along in their careers, they are surprisingly generous with their time and expertise. So oftentimes it's just getting a hold of them and saying, hey, can I take you out for lunch? Can I buy you a coffee? Get to know you. And that's how you build it, is one connection at a time. It's not stepping on stage and pulling up your QR code to connect with a bunch of people on LinkedIn. Like that's not a real network. You don't know those people. Right. I'm actually very protective of the people I accept connection requests from on LinkedIn, because I want, if somebody in my network is scrolling through my Rolodex there and they say, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? I want at least 90% of the time, I want to be able to say, yes, I know them well. Here's what they're working on. Let me get a double opt-in. I'll broker an introduction. So I don't like somebody saying, do you know this person well enough to make an introduction? And my answer is no. That sucks.
Yeah, that does. So that's really interesting. A lot of people say just accept a connect request from everyone. So that's an interesting way to view it. And I know that I found when I was really starting off building my network, when I started inviting sort of those valuable people to coffee or to talk or to chat, at the end of it, I really made a point to say, how can I help you? And really trying to give to their network before I expected anything from them. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, what would you tell someone who's starting out doing that?
Yeah. Well, starting out, I mean, if we're talking early,
Yeah.
it's going to be rare where you're actually going to be able to help them, and that's okay.
Mm,
And they oftentimes know that, and they're
yeah.
still willing to meet with you anyway and give you advice, and they broker those introductions. But very quickly, I mean, I took it very aggressively. As I was scaling my first business, I was picking my dad's brain one day. He sat there and he was thinking, he was conjuring up something very wise to say, and he said, "Son, I have no idea."
That's great. That's
And
great.
but then he followed it with something actually useful. And he said, "You're asking me questions to problems I have never faced, to solutions I've never had to find myself." So he said, "If you want to get answers to these questions, you need to find people who have dealt with this problem before. So
Mm,
talk to people who have been there and done that, who have faced the same challenges that you're currently facing, and then they can tell you exactly what they did."
right.
And that was the best advice I ever got, because I then went on a mission for several years, and I grabbed a prop for this interview.
Oh, please. I want to see it.
Uh, this These are handwritten, except for this little binder. There's maybe a couple of things in here from like talks or something, but most of these are handwritten notes. I don't know if you can see the labels. It says interviews, and it's separated by years. So you can see, I think it dates all the way back to the earliest one in here, 2014.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is a series of interviews that I call them mentor notes or interviews. I think they might have changed over the years what I called them. But that was 2014 is when my dad gave me that advice. And then I started interviewing these people and I started reaching out to them. And at first it was asking my dad, "Well, do you know anybody that I could talk to?" And so he introduced me to the most successful person he knew. And then one follow-up question, I would buy them lunch, even though I was a broke kid and they were multi-millionaires. I always say, like, you are the one getting the value. So if there's anything you can do for them, you can buy them their food, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and you meet them where they're at. So I was driving sometimes 4 hours to meet somebody for a 1 hour lunch. So I
Wow.
drive 4 hours, meet 1 hour for lunch, drive 4 hours back. I did that many times. But then you've got this valuable connection as someone early in your career, or even if you're later in your career and you're trying to grow that network and become that hub of connection that we're talking about today. That's how you start doing it. Is it's getting your hands dirty, it's rolling up your sleeves and getting in the car and driving sometimes.
Yeah.
And but nowadays, this is before Zoom. Now it's way easier to do that. You can just send them a little LinkedIn message, connection request, and say, "Hey, my name's so and so. I would love to. I'm trying to do this in my career. I'm having this problem, which it seems you have experience with. Could I snag 30 minutes of your time on your calendar so I could hear what you went through when you dealt with this problem?" Being upfront and transparent instead of being like, "How can I help you?" Like,
Yeah.
for me, if I see somebody I don't know that's saying, "Hey, I'm trying to, like, how can I help you right now?" It's like, you can help me by leaving me alone because I'm so packed and busy right now. I don't have time to talk to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
somebody says, "Hey, I'm trying to scale a marketing agency and I see that you sold one a couple of years ago. What advice can you give me some pointers? I'm having troubles with picking a niche." And I'm absolutely,
Right.
bam, I'll jump on a 30-minute Zoom call or I'll meet them for coffee or something. And I'm much more willing to entertain a conversation with somebody when the ask is transparent. This is my personal opinion. I'm sure people are different, but
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I can't remember which rabbit hole we were going down. I
That's
kind of branched in
okay.
a million
These are
directions.
all great rabbit holes. I liked that you talked about the ask needing to be transparent. I think that really speaks to authenticity. And
Absolutely.
I really appreciate, I know like you said, you do, but I really appreciate too when people are willing to tell me exactly what it is that they're expecting from the conversation, So like
Mhm.
and not necessarily like I'm expecting to learn blah 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 blah, but I'd really like to learn about X that you've done, or I'd
Yeah.
really love to know more about how you became an ad executive or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I think that's another great pointer for people. But everybody really does this their own way. And so, what are some of the ways that you actively facilitate connecting others in being a connection hub?
Yeah. So there's two things that I do primarily. For one-to-one connections, I broker introductions. So first, what I do is I get double opt-in, and actually, I would say 50% of the introductions I do are me wanting to introduce these two people, not being asked to, hey, I see you know so and so, or do you know anybody who knows X, Y, and Z? Can you introduce me to them? That's probably half. But the other half is I can see in my network somebody has a problem. I know somebody who's done that before, or just yesterday I introduced somebody who was it's a fellow entrepreneur in my entrepreneurs organization group, and she's got an accessibility company and she needs some help with Salesforce. And I just went golfing last week with somebody I just met for the first time, who is he is the head of client relations at a Salesforce consultancy. And I went, perfect. So I brokered an introduction. Now they're talking about doing business together. So that was something unprompted. I saw that, posted in a forum, like a group Slack channel that I'm in. And then I went golfing earlier that week. So made the connection yesterday via an email intro. And I try to have some fun with that and give a little background context, so it tees up the conversation for success instead of like, hey, so-and-so meet so-and-so, good luck, and leaving it. I like to add context. But first I always get double opt-in, broker that email intro. And then the other thing I do is I like to host founders dinners, and I got that from Dan Martell, is a SaaS influencer, business YouTuber, and a consultant who is really big in the SaaS space. And he actually got it from a guy named Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote the book Never Eat Alone. So when I heard Dan talk about his founders dinners that he does, I had to read Keith's book. So I read it cover to cover. It's a hefty book, but it was incredible. And it transformed my networking because it became a means of facilitating meaningful, deep connections that weren't always just business. Sometimes it's hosting a bonfire and inviting people from different industries that you think would enjoy knowing each other or benefit from knowing each other. Maybe not in short term, but long term. It's good to make those connections. And then you're always remembered as the person that introduced them.
Yeah.
Right. And I like to keep them intimate. I like to keep them at like 10 people or less. So that way it feels more like you can have deeper conversations with a few people instead of you're going to a networking event and now there's 50 people and you maybe meet 3 people that were meaningful, which is good too. And that's how you get started. But sometimes I'll even host. I was just talking yesterday. I was at a Twins game with a group I'm a part of, and maybe that's another nugget. Join peer groups in your industry.
Ooh, yeah.
You'll speed network like crazy.
Yeah.
But just yesterday, I was talking about somebody who's building an Amazon product business. So they're buying a couple of businesses in that space, and they're consolidating them. Putting them all under one warehouse, under one brand, leveraging staff, stuff like that. And I said, you should meet my friend, Steve, because he's done this a dozen times and he's done this with many more zeros behind it than you and I have ever seen. And I said, if you two want to meet up for lunch or go golfing or whatever, I like to facilitate conversations around something, whether it's a meal or it's golfing or it's a walk. I've been doing a lot of walk meetings lately.
Yeah.
And I said, I said, here's my caveat, and I don't always do this, but I'll introduce you to if you want to meet up for golf or something, but I want to be the third wheeler and I will just be a fly on the wall and just listen because I'm sure I could learn a ton just from hearing you two talk shop. Yeah. So I'd probably get a little crash course in Amazon just from listening to those two talk for 18 holes about their businesses. So I do that all the time too.
Yeah, that is another really cool. So just to summarize, we have like we have the founders dinners, we have the one-to-one connections, introducing people, we have the becoming the third wheel, we have the joining peer groups. All of those are great strategies that you can use, anyone can use to grow their network and to become a connection hub. So tell me about some of the opportunities that you've created for yourself through these actions and interactions.
The obvious answer is earning business. I connected with somebody years ago through LinkedIn. This is when I was early. In fact, Mike might have a sheet or two of paper in one of these stacks here.
Yeah.
Interviewed him because he owned a marketing agency for fitness businesses, for gyms. And I was building a marketing agency. So I talked to him and learned from him and took down a bunch of notes. And fast forward, 7 years or whatever, here I am at Gym Desk. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to reach out to Mike because there is a massive opportunity for us to refer business to each other. And now we're in conversations about building a very deep partnership that'll be extremely lucrative for both their business and for ours. And that was something that was a 7-year payback period for when he gave me advice early in my career. I couldn't really pay him back yet, but here we are 7 years later. And now I'm saying, hey, I can bring you a lot of business back. And it's been extremely valuable. So
yeah,
that's an obvious answer.
Cool. Yeah, that's such a fantastic example. I know some of the opportunities that were created for me in that same vein were just the ability to have conversations with people who never would have had conversations with me previously, just by sort of putting myself out there and, connecting people, or by meeting people, like you said, at meetup, peer meetups and things like that. But all of those things have grown my network and helped me. Not honestly, whenever I look for a job, I don't have to do a whole lot of work to do it because I'm already making those connections and proving my value in other people's networks. So, if you're pivoting your career right now, if you're looking for a new job, start doing some of these things. And, it's like when you build up the value of your network, you won't have to rely so much on a resume or a cover letter or, being so incredible in interviews, which all of those things are great. But when you build your network and you build it solid, it's like you're building your own safety net. What would you say to that?
I absolutely agree. And not just a safety net, but a group of advocates that are in your corner. They're on your bench, they're on your team, and they're rooting for you. And oftentimes there are folks that, here's something that's interesting is I feel I like the word you used earlier about authenticity. You're very familiar with this, but I'm a huge fan of radical candor, which is broken down as it's extreme honesty. Being vulnerable with people. And I'm not talking about you're going up to a stranger and saying, my life is in ruins and can you help me, random stranger? It's like, that's not what I'm talking about. It is like genuine connections and being vulnerable. When somebody who you at a certain level, right? And I'm not talking like they're your best friend. Like this is someone in your network who you maybe have known, you've seen each other a couple times a year at events. And they say, how are you doing? Instead of saying, good, you say, actually, I'm really struggling right now with X, Y, and Z. But we're doing really good on A, B, and C. And then you have a conversation and holy crap, they've dealt with X and Y, and they know somebody they're going to introduce you to help you with Z. And that radical candor, that authenticity and being vulnerable has been absolutely lucrative in me as a human being and in my career, and building not just connections at shallow levels, but it's deep, meaningful connections. I'm going through something that I know that you've dealt with in the past, and they're willing to call you and help you through it, and vice versa. I've got people doing the same, calling me. And I'm happy to help them through that stuff too, because I've been there, I've done that. And especially in today's world with, post-COVID, I feel like mental health needs to be forefront. People have been through what you're going through, like you're not alone. And right now I'm talking about like negative stuff, but there's good stuff too, and saying, hey, I'm trying to build a sales team right now, and this is greenfield for me. What did you do? I just had a phone call actually when I went golfing last week, the story I mentioned earlier, that was somebody I met at an event the week prior. We hit it off at a networking event. Somebody had introduced me to them at that event in real time. I said, I'm actually looking for help scaling my, we're building a sales team. I've never had to build a comp package for salespeople before. Do you know anybody? And they said, actually, there's somebody who's here tonight. And then they made that introduction in real time. We hit it off. I said, hey, if you ever want to go golfing sometime, like I'd love to go golfing. And they said, I'm actually going next week with another person you should meet. And then you can just see how it's just a ripple effect. It's one person introduces you to the next and the next and the next and the next. And just yesterday, I introduced somebody that I met on that same golf day. It's just crazy. I think I just did a quantum leap of like 5 connections there in like the last 2 weeks. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. You know what I'm starting to learn is I think I need to learn how to golf, which is unfortunate. I'm really bad at it. Very, very bad at it. But you know what? I think it's a great opportunity. It seems like there's a lot that happens on a golf course. So yeah, very cool. I love that you're talking about these really authentic connections and that they kind of sort of create these quantum leaps for you and continue to create opportunities. I know that you talked a little bit about this, but buying lunches for people and, can you explain a little bit more about your sort of philosophy around the ROI of buying lunches for people, even when you're totally broke?
Oh, absolutely. When I was getting started, money was tight. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I was in debt up to my eyeballs. And I thought, you make decisions about what you're going to spend money on and what you aren't. You're rubbing pennies together, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes paying when the bill came for that meal, I would always say, like, where do you want to meet? Because I'm trying to be accommodating to them because these are the people who are light years ahead of me in the career.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, let's go to this restaurant. I love this restaurant. And then you sit down and you take 3 pages of notes and I add it to my file and I get home and then the bill comes or you get the menu and there's no pricing listed. And you go, oh my God, please.
Uh-oh. This is gonna be painful.
Yeah. And then you get the bill and it's like $200 and you drank water the whole time. Right. So, and you're like, man, that $200 is like a third of my rent at the time or something, or half my rent, so the return on investment is not for everybody because you have to almost be aggressive in implementing that advice and leveraging that network. If you're just going to sit on that information and you just like to meet people and take notes, or maybe you don't even take notes and you just like to do it because it sounds fun or it looks sexy on LinkedIn when you take a selfie together, the return is not going to be there because you're not taking action, right? You're not continuing to build that relationship over time and make introductions for them and help them when they're in need, or 7 years later, doing business with them again, or for the first time, I should say. Or for me, every December, I do a huge review of my entire year, what went well, what didn't do well, what can I change, what are my goals for the next year? And I actually reread all of these every December.
Wow.
And it gets faster and faster because at this point, the 2014 ones I've read how many times, right?
Yeah.
And the first couple of years, I actually read them every few months because I was so new to these concepts. It was like repetition, right? And you're essentially getting, to me, the return on investment from some of these lunches were much greater than the education I received at university for the short stint that I was there. Yeah. It's okay, if I'm going to spend $5,000 at a class at University of St. Thomas, and I'm going to learn X, Y, and Z, or I can go straight to the source of the person who wrote the book, what is the curriculum for that class, and then I actually confront them with, I'm trying to solve this problem, or just even early in my career, I didn't have specific asks. It was, I want to be successful. I don't know what that looks like. And just being transparent of, I don't know what questions to ask you because I'm that new. I don't even know what to ask you. Like, I'm just looking for you to just point me in the right direction. that was maybe the first 50 interviews I ever had. Is I was walking in blind and said, all I know is you are where I want to be. And I just want some advice of how to get there. Right. And then as you go through that process and you build out your network and you grow in your career, you start to get more granular and you can ask specific questions and you can seek people out because it's a big world. There's a lot of people to talk to. You almost have to be very specific of who you're trying to talk to and when and who you can make time for in your calendar. So
totally. Well, yeah. Well, we've reached the end of our time, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. I always enjoy talking to you, and really enjoyed working with you. So I'm glad that you agreed to do this podcast, and I appreciate that. Let's end this with a couple of rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what is the most random job you have ever had?
My aunt's neighbor hired me to go take pictures of a house in St. Cloud, Minnesota that he was considering to buy solely for the fact that it had been abandoned. There was still a bunch of furniture in there. Mm-hmm. And he was a furniture flipper, reseller. Yeah. So he was going to buy this rundown house solely to liquidate the furniture inside of it. And I was probably, I had my license because that's why they hired me so I could drive out there. So I was 16. I drove out there with a borrowed camera from somebody. I took pictures and there wasn't electricity in this house. And the basement was like one of those old fieldstone ones, like old foundation, dark, musty, creepy, had been abandoned for a long time. There's still furniture, so it's all dusty. It looked like a horror movie. And I had to go downstairs and take pictures of this house. And I was so scared.
This is how I die.
Trying to get them in there. And then the pictures were blurry because I was running through. So they weren't even valuable to the guy, and I felt so bad. But so that's probably the most random thing.
Oh God, that's so funny, Dick. I love all your stories. So the last rapid fire question is, what is the worst career advice that you have ever gotten?
Worst career advice. I can tell you what the best career advice is.
Sure.
And that's probably what I mentioned earlier from my dad, who said, you have to talk to the people who have been where you want to go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would say maybe the opposite of that, which would be a bad thing to do for your career, is if you're constantly talking to your friends, and I love my friends, right? But they aren't where I want to be. And if I'm asking them for career advice, or what do you think I should do in my business or with my team or this customer, I'm trying to deal with this problem, this obstacle, and you're picking the brains of your peers, you're not getting the kind of advice that you could be getting. Right. I would say that's probably the worst thing you can do is get advice and follow it from people who are at your level or below, as far as career advancement and experience level. So there you go.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Dick. I just really appreciate it. And I hope that you have such a great day. I want to thank everyone who joined us again for this live stream. Thank you for your patience with the technical issues that happened earlier today. If you want to listen to this episode again, it goes live on all relevant podcasting channels on Monday. Don't forget to subscribe to the channels and like and share with your friends who might value this information, or family who might value and benefit from this information. And join me next week live at 8:30 a.m. on the Newly podcast, where you get more practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. See you next time.